The chamber lay buried beneath the imperial palace, far below the vaulted halls, where pilgrims wept and priests thundered sermons to an uncaring sky. Here there were no hymns, only the quiet murmur of ancient machines and the slow drift of dust through beams of lumen light. Rows of sealed archives stretched into darkness, each marked with sigils of denial and oaths written in blood and ash. It was said that within these vaults slept truths capable of unmaking empires. Most were never opened. One, however, had been disturbed. The mystery that gnaws at the heart of the Imperium is not etched into a single forbidden tome. It is woven into every contradiction that defines humanity's dominion among the stars. The Emperor of mankind sits immobile upon the golden throne, worshipped as a god by trillions, yet denied divinity by his own ancient decree. He is called the savior of humanity, yet his empire is a place of endless war, ignorance, and ritualized suffering. The question is not why the galaxy burns, but whether it was always meant to. In the earliest surviving accounts, the Emperor is described not as a god, but as a man who understood the future too clearly to speak of it. He walked among the tribes of ancient Terra, guiding, manipulating, culling, and nurturing in equal measure. Empires rose and fell at a silent urging. Religions bloomed, then withered. All were tools, discarded when they no longer served. Even then, he knew what humanity would become if left unguided. Prey for the warp, fodder for powers that fed on fear and excess. That knowledge shaped every decision that followed. During the Unification Wars, he revealed himself openly for the first time, clad not in divine radiance, but in the cold authority of conquest. Thunder warriors broke the techno-barbarian tyrants, and later were themselves erased when they outlived their usefulness. The pattern was established early. Compassion was secondary to outcome. Survival justified annihilation. To those who would later call him merciless, this was his first lesson to humanity. Sentiment had no place in a hostile galaxy. And yet, even then, he forbade worship. Temples were torn down. Priests were silenced. Reason and secular unity were declared the Imperium's foundation. The imperial truth promised a future without superstition, where knowledge would replace faith and science would shield mankind from the unknown. It was a vision as austere as it was ambitious, but beneath it lay an unspoken fear. The Emperor did not reject religion out of humility. He rejected it because he understood belief itself was dangerous. The warp listens. It always has. Emotion, devotion, despair, and hope bleed into it, shaping entities beyond mortal comprehension. The Chaos Gods were not born in a moment, but accreted over millennia of unchecked psychic resonance. The Emperor knew this. To be worshipped was not merely to be honored, it was to be changed. Thus, his denial of godhood was not philosophy, but self-preservation. The Great Crusade carried this contradiction across the stars. Primarchs, each a masterpiece of genetic and psychic craft, led legions to reunite lost human worlds. There were sons, generals, symbols, and weapons all at once. In their presence, the Emperor appeared almost distant, delegating conquest, while he pursued a project hidden beneath Terra's crust. Even to his sons, he spoke little of his ultimate aim. Trust was rationed carefully, knowledge even more so. Then came the scattering of the Primarchs, an event officially blamed on the ruinous powers. Warp storms howled, reality fractured, and the Emperor's greatest creations were hurled across the galaxy. It is here that the mystery first sharpens into something painful. For a being who planned centuries ahead, who anticipated betrayals not yet conceived, the loss of his sons appears either a catastrophic failure or a calculated risk, which remains unanswered, and that silence has echoed through 10,000 years of bloodshed. The Horus heresy is remembered as the moment everything broke. Brother turned on brother. Ideals drowned in ambition and resentment. The Emperor was forced onto the golden throne, his body ruined, his voice silenced. But even this calamity raises uncomfortable questions. The Chaos Gods sought to kill him. Yes, but they also sought to stop him. The Webway Project, the severing of humanity's reliance on the warp, threatened not only their influence, but their existence. Horus was not merely a traitor. He was a weapon aimed at the future. Now, the Emperor endures in a state that defies definition. Neither dead nor alive, sustained by machinery and sacrifice, His presence still burns through the warp as the Astronomicon. Ships navigate by his light. Worlds depend upon it. Yet the cost is staggering. 1,000 psychers die every day to maintain his vigil. The Imperium calls this holy necessity. Others, in quieter corners of the galaxy, call it something else entirely. The greatest mystery, then, is not hidden in some lost scroll or erased legion. It is embodied in the Emperor's silence. Whether he is waiting, dying, transforming, or trapped is unknown. The Imperium believes its survival depends on him remaining as he is. But if the truth were known, if humanity understood what he truly is, or what he is becoming, faith itself might shatter. And perhaps that is why, in the deepest vaults of Terra, the most dangerous records are not those that condemn the Emperor, but those that try to explain him. The sealed testimonies do not speak of the Emperor as a distant idol, but as a presence that bent the lives of those closest to him into shapes they never fully understood. Malkador the Sigillite stands foremost among them, not merely a regent or advisor, but a man who saw behind the curtain and paid the price for that knowledge. In fragments preserved within warded cogitator banks, Malkador is described as weary long before the heresy, burdened by secrets too heavy for any one mind. He enforced silence with ruthless precision, not out of cruelty, but necessity. Some truths, he believed, would unravel humanity faster than chaos ever could. It was Malkador who oversaw the culling of histories, the redaction of entire campaigns, and the excision of names from imperial memory. The missing primarchs were not simply forgotten. They were actively erased. Statues were destroyed, legion heraldry burned, and battle records altered until even the shape of their absence became indistinct. Those who remembered too clearly did not live long. The implication was unmistakable. Whatever those lost sons represented, their existence threatened the Emperor's design at a fundamental level. The primarchs who remained each carried a fragment of that design, though none were allowed to see the whole. Guilliman believed in order and governance, crafting realms that could endure without constant war. Lorger sought meaning, a spiritual framework to bind humanity together. Magnus pursued knowledge, peering into the warp with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Each, in his own way, was reaching toward something the Emperor refused to explain. Their conflicts were not merely personal failings, but collisions between partial truths. The Emperor's relationship with his sons was defined by distance. He loved them, if that word can be applied, but he did not trust them. Trust required disclosure, and disclosure carried risk. This is most evident in his treatment of Magnus. When Magnus breached the wards of the imperial palace to warn of Horus' betrayal, he shattered the Webway project in the process. The Emperor's fury was not only over the damage done, but over the confirmation of his fear. Knowledge, even well-intentioned, was dangerous. Magnus had proven it beyond doubt. The Webway project itself reveals more about the Emperor than any sermon or legend. It was not a weapon nor a throne, but an escape. Humanity's dependence on warp travel left it vulnerable to demonic predation and psychic catastrophe. By granting access to the ancient Eldari pathways, the Emperor sought to shepherd mankind through a transition period, after which the warp would no longer hold dominion over human destiny. It was a plan measured in millennia, requiring patience, secrecy, and absolute control. That control slipped during the heresy. As Horus advanced on Terra, the Emperor was forced to abandon the Webway's defense, redirecting his strength to survival. The resulting incursion flooded the hidden tunnels beneath the palace with demons, turning a sanctuary into a charnel house. Custodians and Sisters of Silence died by the thousands, holding back an infinity of horrors. The Emperor's dream burned there, unseen by the Imperium above, even as it sang his praises. When the final confrontation came aboard the Vengeful Spirit, it was not merely a duel between father and son. It was the collapse of a future. Horus, swollen with the favor of chaos, represented everything the Emperor sought to prevent. A human elevated by warp power, unbound by restraint. A living conduit for the gods of the Immaterium. The Emperor's victory was absolute, yet ruinous. To destroy Horus, he expended what remained of his corporeal vitality, consigning himself to eternal stasis. The Golden Throne was never meant to be a tomb. It was a conduit, a regulator, a tool to focus psychic energy on a scale no single mind could otherwise withstand. Its current function is a grotesque inversion of its original purpose. Instead of freeing humanity from the warp, it binds the Emperor to it, anchoring his soul against dissolution. The daily sacrifice of psychers is not nourishment in the conventional sense, but ballast, keeping him from drifting into something unknown. In the millennia that followed, the Imperium transformed his silence into doctrine. Lorger's forbidden words spread, reshaped, and sanctified. The Emperor became a god not by decree, but by absence. Faith filled the vacuum left by explanation. This, too, may have been inevitable. Humanity, deprived of understanding, clung to belief as a substitute. Whether the Emperor foresaw this outcome or was trapped by it remains uncertain. What is clear is that those closest to him understood the danger. The custodes guard not only his body, but the secrets surrounding it. The Inquisition hunts knowledge as fervently as it hunts heresy. Every act of suppression, every burned archive, is an admission that the truth is unstable. The Emperor's plan did not fail completely, but it fractured, and the fragments are sharp enough to cut anyone who grasps them too firmly. By the end of this long, blood-soaked epic, the Emperor remains the axis of human existence, yet more distant than ever. He is sustained, revered, feared, and misunderstood in equal measure. Those who glimpse the outlines of his original design rarely survive the revelation. And still, the Astronomicon burns, a silent reminder that whatever he intended, it is not yet finished. Speculation thrives where certainty is forbidden, and around the Emperor's immobile form speculation has hardened into something almost solid. Among the most dangerous ideas is the belief that he is no longer entirely human, if he ever truly was. 10,000 years bound to the Golden Throne, sustained by sacrifice and worship, have altered the equation beyond recognition. The question is no longer what the Emperor was, but what he is becoming, and whether that transformation is intentional or catastrophic. Some among the Ordo Malleus, their conclusions sealed behind sigils of terminal sanction, argue that the Emperor is in the process of apotheosis. Not the crude ascension offered by chaos, but a slower, colder metamorphosis driven by belief itself. Trillions pray to him daily. Their fear, hope, obedience, and despair bleed into the warp, and the warp responds as it always has. If the chaos gods were shaped by emotion over eons, then the Emperor is being shaped now, molded into a god of order, tyranny, and survival at any cost. In this reading, the imperial creed is not a perversion of his will, but the mechanism of his rebirth. Others find this theory intolerable, not because it is heretical, but because it may be accurate. A god emperor would be bound by the same metaphysical laws as the ruinous powers, sustained by belief and constrained by it. He would no longer be free to guide humanity beyond the warp, only to dominate it from within. This would explain his silence. Gods do not reason with mortals. They exert pressure. The Astronomicon, then, is not a beacon of guidance, but an emanation of will, forcing reality into a shape that permits human survival, however brutal that shape may be. A rival theory contends the opposite, that the Emperor is actively resisting this transformation, and that the Golden Throne is less a throne than a dam holding back an existential flood. In this view, his consciousness is locked in perpetual struggle, not against chaos alone, but against the Imperium itself. Every prayer is a weight. Every act of worship pulls him closer to a destiny he never wanted. The sacrifices keep him alive, but they also bind him, feeding the very psychic economy he sought to dismantle. This interpretation casts the ecclesiarchy in a grim new light. Far from servants of the Emperor's will, they may be his jailers, unknowingly reinforcing the chains that bind him to godhood. The Inquisition's obsessive control of doctrine begins to resemble damage control rather than piety. If belief empowers, then belief must be shaped, regulated, and weaponized. Faith becomes another resource, harvested and refined like promethium or flesh. The missing primarchs resurface here, not as lost generals, but as warnings. There are hints, scattered and inconsistent, that at least one of them perceived the trajectory of the Emperor's fate and rejected it outright, whether through philosophical dissent or catastrophic discovery. That Primarch's existence threatened the coherence of the Emperor's plan. Erasure was not punishment, but quarantine. The Imperium could survive rebellion, It could not survive revelation. Even the chaos gods appear unsettled by the emperor's condition. They despise him, yet they do not move decisively to destroy Terra. The Great Rift has split the galaxy, demonic incursions multiply, and still the Golden Throne endures. Some scholars suggest the ruinous powers are waiting, uncertain whether the Emperor's death would free humanity or unleash something far worse. A newborn god of order could upset the balance of the warp as profoundly as Slaanesh once did. The Emperor's psychic presence complicates this further. Astropaths speak of his light as both comforting and agonizing, a pressure that scours the soul. Navigators see it as a roaring inferno, barely contained. These are not the sensations associated with a stable, benevolent entity. They are symptoms of strain, of a mind stretched across impossible distances and incompatible roles. He is beacon, shield, prisoner, and potential god all at once. There is also the unsettling possibility that the Emperor foresaw this outcome and accepted it as the least disastrous option. Humanity's psychic evolution was inevitable. Without guidance, it would have birthed horrors beyond control. By becoming the focal point of belief, the Emperor may have redirected that evolution inward, anchoring it to a single, known entity rather than allowing it to fragment into countless warp-born abominations. If so, the Imperium's suffering is not a failure of his plan, but its cost. This reframes the Horus Heresy not as a tragic derailment, but as a necessary trauma. The Emperor's incapacitation forced humanity into dependence, accelerating the spread of worship and consolidating psychic output. The long war, the endless sacrifice, the rigid dogma, all serve to maintain a stable psychic ecosystem centered on Terra. Stability, not enlightenment, becomes the priority. Survival eclipses progress. Yet this stability is brittle. The Great Rift has shown how fragile the system truly is. Should the Astronomicon falter, should the Golden Throne fail, the psychic shockwave would be immeasurable. Humanity might be freed from its chains, or it might be annihilated in an instant. The Emperor's fate and humanity's are now inseparable, bound together by decisions made 10,000 years ago and sustained by ignorance ever since. As these theories circulate in whispers and encrypted sigils, one truth becomes unavoidable. The Emperor is not a static relic of a bygone age. He is an ongoing event, a process still unfolding. Whether that process ends in salvation, damnation, or something beyond both remains uncertain. What is certain is that the Imperium stands on the edge of a transformation it neither understands nor controls, and the silence from the Golden Throne grows heavier with each passing century. The future of the Imperium hangs not on prophecy, but on endurance, and endurance has a breaking point. The Emperor's continued existence sustains humanity, yet it also arrests it, freezing the species in a state of perpetual emergency. Every reform is deferred, every truth postponed, because survival demands unanimity. In this suspended state, the Imperium mistakes stasis for stability, unaware that decay flourishes most readily where movement is forbidden. Those who stand vigil closest to the Golden Throne sense the change first. The custodes report fluctuations in the throne's demands, subtle surges in psychic consumption that do not correspond to any known threat. Tech priests whisper of mechanisms behaving in ways their blueprints do not predict, as if responding to an intelligence neither wholly mechanical nor entirely human. These signs are never announced. They are catalogued, sealed, and buried beneath layers of prayer and denial. Across the galaxy, the Emperor's light strains against new darkness. The Great Rift has severed worlds from his guidance, forcing humanity to confront what it means to exist without him. Some planets collapse into anarchy within months. Others adapt with unsettling speed, forming cultures less reliant on Terra's distant authority. In these places, the Emperor becomes an idea rather than a presence, and ideas are mutable. The Imperium fears this more than rebellion, for it suggests humanity might survive without the shape he imposed upon it. The question of succession is never spoken aloud, yet it haunts every council chamber. There is no contingency for a silent god finally falling silent forever. Guilliman's return has only sharpened this anxiety. A Primarch who remembers the Emperor as he was, not as he is worshipped, cannot reconcile the man with the god. His efforts to rationalize, to streamline, to impose logic on faith-driven institutions, expose fractures that were once hidden by dogma. Each reform sparks resistance, not because it is ineffective, but because it threatens the narrative that sustains the throne. Chaos watches patiently. The ruinous powers do not rush this moment, for time is their most reliable ally. They understand that the Emperor's greatest strength is also his greatest vulnerability. As long as he remains bound, humanity remains bound with him. A sudden victory could shatter the system too quickly, risking outcomes even chaos cannot control. Better to let the Imperium bleed itself dry, feeding the warp with despair while clinging to a beacon that grows ever more distant. And still, there are signs of will. Astropaths report moments of clarity amid the agony, fleeting impressions of direction rather than force. A fleet arrives precisely where it is needed. A world holds when it should fall. These incidents are too rare to constitute proof, yet too consistent to dismiss. They suggest the Emperor is not entirely passive, that some fragment of intention still navigates the immaterial storm. Whether this is conscious guidance or reflexive defense is impossible to say. The most unsettling possibility is that the Emperor's fate is no longer his own. Bound by belief, sustained by ritual, and constrained by machinery, he may have become a nexus rather than an actor. Humanity projects its fears and hopes into him, and he reflects them back magnified. In this cycle, the Imperium creates the god it needs, even if that god is not the one it was promised. The distinction between guardian and jailer blurs until it becomes meaningless. If the Emperor were to awaken fully, the consequences would be incalculable. A reborn master of mankind might tear down the institutions that have calcified around him, plunging the Imperium into chaos in the name of salvation. Alternatively, his awakening could annihilate his worshippers in a psychic conflagration, a final act of liberation that leaves humanity to face the warp alone. Even continued stasis carries its own risk, as entropy gnaws at systems never meant to last this long. Thus, the Imperium persists, not because it understands its God, but because it cannot afford to question him. Every unanswered prayer, every sacrificed soul, tightens the knot binding humanity to a future it did not choose. The Emperor's greatest mystery is no longer his origin or his intention, but whether there remains any path forward that does not end in extinction or transformation beyond recognition. In the deepest chambers beneath Terra, the golden throne hums on, a relic of unmatched power and unresolved purpose. It is a monument to humanity's fear of the unknown and its willingness to endure any suffering rather than face it. As long as it endures, the galaxy remains locked in a moment stretched across millennia, waiting for a conclusion that may never come. And somewhere within that silent, burning presence, a question lingers, unanswered and unanswerable. When the Emperor finally speaks, will his words be a command, a warning, or an epitaph for all that mankind has become?